Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Shuey, and I am the founder of Happily. And every Wednesday at 2 p.m. PST, I come on live to LinkedIn and YouTube to connect with my community and to also have a conversation with a friend and a colleague about something that's happening in our crazy world today in this moment. And I almost didn't come in today because it's been really hard to just get up on camera and have a conversation, even off camera, um, because of obviously it should be obvious what's happening right now with George Floyd and police brutality. It was already so much with the coronavirus, with unemployment and the devastation of the events industry, and now this. This is gonna be a tough one, I think, for me certainly, maybe for you too. But thank you so much for being here and giving me the space to share with you what's going on. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this picture right here is worth so much more than that. For those of you who don't know, this is George Floyd. He was casually murdered in broad daylight on the streets in Minneapolis by police, the people who should be taking care of us, of our safety. And the only reason why we know this is because bystanders on the streets videotaped it. They videotaped 4 policemen holding him down and killing him. We also only know this because of other civilians who watched that video of George Floyd in his last dying breath saying, "I can't breathe." Now, it's funny, but the person that I'm interviewing today is not a Black person, and I honestly, I even thought like maybe I should cancel this because this is the time right now where we should be listening to Black voices. But I'm in thinking about the body of work that RX Fogarty and his project Dear World, the breadth of his work in actually helping people to tell their stories and capturing it in an image, and the vulnerability and the honesty, the really true honesty that he brings to everyone that he interacts with, it actually felt really fitting to bring him up. So I'm first going to show a clip of Dear World before I bring RX up, just to give you a sense of what they do. So 1 second, let me find that. All right.
When I was 26, a man sent butterflies down my spine and into my stomach. The night that changed my life happened unexpectedly. I was in New Orleans after
And with that, Robert, welcome, my brave soul. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. I want to acknowledge two things. First of all, thank you for what you said at the beginning. I echo all your comments about George Floyd and what's going on, and secondly, this giving me the opportunity to share what I've learned, and it means a lot that you decided not to cancel and still gave me the space. I am in a kind of a listening mode for the last week for sure. So it's not lost on me how important it is to listen and that you believed in me enough to keep the space. So thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's crazy, but like, I asked you to come because two weeks ago, I saw your Dear Nurses project, and I was like, everybody needs to know about this, and it's I mean, if you could tell everyone what the Dear Nurses project is, like an overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, I will. It seems nostalgic now, even though it happened 2 weeks ago. But my team and I have been working with for about a month and a half to plan this. The American Association of Critical Care Nurses is a client and a partner of Dear World, and frankly, we were going to do something before COVID at their annual nurses convention, and it got canceled. And we decided, what could we do in this time? So we had incredible access to nurses working in ICUs, and the project really came together pretty seamlessly in terms of how we wanted to use our process to tell stories with a group of folks, which is what we've done a lot over the last 10 years. So my team and I, about filmmakers, photographers, writers, producers, we had a small team, and of course we socially distanced, and we had temperature checks, and we did all that kind of pre-production work, made sure everyone knew kind of a full heart and full mind of what it meant to go and tell these stories, and we did it as safely as possible, and interviewed 40 nurses, all who have been working in South Louisiana, where I come from, in New Orleans. Their stories of being an epicenter of COVID-19 in New Orleans. And so we did this, of course, on their off days. And when we were there 2 weeks ago, it was about 7 weeks after the peak. So it was also something where they felt really confident that this wouldn't be taking away from their work either. So 40 nurses, 40 stories. Nurses.dearworld.org is where you can see them, and some of our best work for sure. We're just really proud of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, but like, I mean, the picture that I showed earlier, this picture, right, where somebody else is actually taking George Floyd's words and putting them on their body, like it just so reminded me of your work, and your like storytelling process. But I'm sort of curious, like earlier today when we were chatting, I asked you how you felt about that, and you said that your storytelling process, like as a creative in your storytelling process, you had a very different take on it. I'd love to sort of hear like how you digest this. I mean, it's interesting how there's a photo and they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but then as soon as you add a couple words more, it just exponentially grows, right? So would love for you to actually first digest this and then share the story of the nurse after that, to like kind of juxtapose, I think, the two stories and how you think through those.
Yeah, happy to. Our process is rooted in first person narrative. I mean, it isn't rocket science, but I think it's a tried and true method. If you accept the thesis that every person has a story worth sharing, you can work people through a pretty simple process to mine for meaningful moments in their lives. And that's what Dear World is at its core. So when I see the juxtaposition of I Can't Breathe on the faces or on signs of hundreds of thousands of people now, it reminds me, most importantly, that where those those words came from were pieces of dialogue from two men, Eric Gardner and George Floyd, in the waning moments of their lives. These were the pieces of dialogue. And when I think about Dear World stories with the living, we often talk about how dialogue is a beautiful place to what we call the lead, or the artifact of our stories, what we write on our bodies. And what is happening now with I Can't Breathe is it's becoming a calling card or a call to arms for a larger movement, but it started in dialogue. It started in the last words of two men's lives. So for me, it was kind of hit me of, had Eric Gardner been alive today, had George Floyd been alive today, and they went through Dear World's process, and they talked about this experience they had with the police that they survived, but this I Can't Breathe would have been what they wrote on their bodies 110% every time. If I was able to interview them about that scene and if they would have survived it, that is what would have come out.
But here, they can't say that, right?
They can't say it, and now it's really up to us. It's really up to society writ large to carry those words. And I think it's funny when you think about, and I have to stop myself, of like, this isn't a mantra. This is dialogue. This isn't a mantra. This isn't a hashtag. Mm-hmm. This is dialogue from two men's mouths in the waning moments of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're carrying on their voices because they can.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, the dialogue versus mantra, because what you're doing, because I've been through the Dear World process, and maybe we can actually talk through the steps like super quick, or like just again, so people know what that is. But you know, the Dear World process really starts with a sort of, people reflectively think about a moment in their lives that was very catalytic, or how do you describe that?
Yeah. Well, you know, now we start with what's interesting is in this process, 3 steps. The first step is internal reflection on people we care about, mantras, values, things that we hold close to our hearts. And then we ask people to kind of make a decision in that moment, what they wanted to focus on, a person maybe, or a value, or a mantra. Then we get into what we call brain tattoos. So 3 or 4 moments in our lives that are evoked, scenes that are evoked from a word like, for you, Sarah, maybe experience, or a word like belonging for others. Scenes, moments in our lives, and then you pick one of those scenes, and then that's where we build the core Dear World story and message around one scene from one moment in your life that is meaningful. So it's not a life story. Dear World stories are not life stories. They're little windows into moments in our lives that only we can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And often what on the back of those, what you write on your body as the lead, we often say, is not the title of the book. It's not the chapter of the book. It's one line pulled from one scene inside of the book.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, like, I didn't dig it up. I guess I could, but like when I did it, like my words were, "You're not on mute," which is also, I mean, like, it's interesting since muted has been like a theme, you know, this week, but your voice and everything, and my "You're not on mute" was like me like railing into a client of ours, and how like inadequate he was, and I was just like to the brink, and I wasn't on mute. So him and his whole team heard that, which was pretty gnarly. We're still friends. But yeah, so anyways, but that was, and I remember like writing that, writing you're not on mute, like on my body, and almost like that story is actually like really embarrassing, because I've really pride myself on like my professionalism, you know, like generally, and getting along with others, and actually like writing those words on my body allowed me to like it allowed me to actually share a moment of in a time when I really like wasn't proud of myself, and to like kind of reclaim that shame, and help and use that. I've actually used that as a lesson, for other like younger producers and people, after me. And so it almost like just having that picture and going through that process like gave me this sort of I wouldn't call it a mantra, but it gave me an experience that that I was able to, to really like recontextualize and share. That's really awesome. And so I'd love to actually.
Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I remember when you told the You're Not on Mute story and feeling that empathy of moments in a lot of our lives where we've messed up, and with the benefit of time and with the benefit of other things, we can kind of reclaim what that story means to us.
Yeah. And I think that like a lot of people, like there's two kinds of people sometimes I think this world. There's a whole spectrum, right? But like maybe these are my extremes, where like I'll do something wrong and just keep moving and forget that I did that. Or I'll do something wrong and I'll think about that forever. And the You're Not on Mute story was funny because it was actually somewhere in between, right? But and actually, like now, as I'm sort of thinking about like racism a lot, and times where I've been a racist, and thinking like actually, me owning that, right? And like not allowing to like push forward to that, like is so powerful. It's actually like it's key to moving forward. And I think that like, yeah.
I mean, 100%. And I feel you on the same emotions of discomfort, uncomfort. The last week, the best thing I knew what to do is like call my Black friends who I know are in a space to take calls. That was the other thing I think is important of like, this idea of listening. So it was made not without some sober conscientious of like, look, I want to check in, but also I got that permission. It was, we've had some really, really, really meaningful conversations around my own bias, my own, like discomfort with where we are, where we need to be, and how to close that gap. And I think you've made so many good points of like, this is the way to move forward. It's the only way to move forward. And I feel really grateful that I have Black friends in New Orleans who I've come up with who are like, yeah, man, call me whenever you want. And it's been really helpful, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, that like, brain tattoo to like a body tattoo, but one that isn't permanent because it's just a marker, right? And you could wash it off in a couple days, right? Like, actually, I don't. That process of like taking this like deeply ingrained, transforming it, and then making it so that it can go away. But then it's also this like pictorial artifact. Just there's so many layers to that, which I think is like why Dear World is like so like it's really an artist. Like I feel like you're an artist of story, like of a storytelling process. What's so beautiful is that you gift that to other people.
Oh, it's been the best thing ever. It started as like a party trick, and I think I've always, I've always wanted to succeed at the things I tried. And, I always wanted to be a communicator and a writer or something in the arts. My mom was an artist. And so this is, I feel really just blessed. And I think what was cool with often some of the most seminal, what's cool about Dear World is like, we just meet folks where they want to be. Some of the stories are what we say is if it's meaningful to you, it's meaningful to us. And there are some folks who use Dear World in a way that truly, I think, changes their life. They've told me that, which is just really cool to I think of Omar Delgado, who was one of the first responders on scene at the Pulse nightclub and was unable to ever go back to the club. He left law enforcement because he had so much PTSD from that experience. And he came back to the club with us. You saw a clip of that in that video, Omar and his son, going back to the club for the first time. And, he just talked very clearly that Dear World was helped him achieve a milestone that he didn't think it was ever gonna be able to do.
Right. Like, again, that transformation, so, and I think I say this often, that people who are like in, who are like event producers or like, community organizers, and specifically the event, you're trying to go for a transformational experience. Yeah. Or like to bring that transformational moment. That is like the true measure, for success, I think, for pretty much anyone that's in the events business. And then everyone always has the trouble with events to sort of capture that. It's like, oh, you can see the photos or the video, but you weren't there, and you did it. But I think I think that the main reason why you did it is because it's a generous process that is focused on also sharing uniquely the story, of other people.
Yeah, Sarah, and I think our whole hypothesis at Dear World for the last 10 years, and even in the digital space now, is like, event designs need to be attendee centric and not stage centric, even though you use the bully pulpit of the stage. And we do too. I mean, I think you need to use the tools at your disposal, but we have really moved into the space of be generous and be ambitious with what your community will do given the right conditions. The conditions are often not set for success. And you know that as well as anyone, but I have always been blown away by our closes. Often we're, some event designers are like, this is back pre-COVID, but in our experiences in the corporate or live experiences, the closing finale of Dear World is we're pulling people up on main stage who are first-time attendees, who are like, not seeing people. It's like agnostic to their title. It is people who come through the process and taking their photo, and they get up and they're as good as any, I would argue, closing keynote or president of the company. It's just like, we got to invest in our people, and invest in the thesis that we all are, given the right conditions, can meet or exceed those expectations.
Yeah, there's two things in there. So one, I just wanted to share like an insight that this week I was preparing for another talk about sort of the backstage of events, and I was showing what was the process pre-COVID. And pre-COVID, it was you had some CEO or some marketing exec that was like, I've got a great idea for an event. And then they'd hire all these people to execute their event. And then at the end, kind of does it go anywhere? Right. But now, and especially I think with live stream and live video, it's community organizers who are or communities who are crying out. We're we need this event. The protesters on the street, they're just creating events, and it's all now about sort of engagement, and it's focused on mission versus focused on ego. And this is where the real transformation, I think, is happening. Where that is a really good new normal that's going to come out of, that's coming out of the coronavirus, is events now have to be mission aligned or else they're not relevant.
1,000%.
And then secondly, Yeah, I remembered that like Kelly Stetzel from TED was the one that introduced me to you, and I think that I shout out Kelly a lot.
What up, Kelly?
I know this is the second time I doubt she even watches these, but but Kelly and I have like a long relationship, but you know how TED like has like ideas we're spreading, and it's so expert based, right? Like your whole thing is about individual stories worth spreading, and it's common based, right? Or it's for everyone. This is like
they're all amongst us. They're everywhere. They're everywhere and anywhere amongst us for sure. Just I think what mostly, Sarah, and it's interesting for us, and I love this. I love the process of helping people be proud of their story by giving it just a little polish. It's like it was always there. They just needed a couple of things to they needed a map, and they needed some hiking boots, and you say, okay, go this way with it. Cool. And I'll see you over there. And that's truly, it's inside of all of us. It really is.
Yeah. This is again, the artist part, where like you could make very complex, like ideas and things like present them so simply and elegantly. So, not to take that away.
I will say I've spent most of my waking hours for the last 10 years trying to figure out how to make it seem simple.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome. It's great. And I love that. I think again, this is like a true artist. It's like a living work and it's never going to be done. I tell people this, I read this, Picasso's my favorite artist and favorite painter. And he would still like go into museums. He got caught by a security guard, like going into a museum with his paintbrush and still fixing like a canvas up on the wall. Like that's a serious artist, right?
So good. If I had a nickel for every time someone's like, so like, what's the goal of Dear World? And I'm like, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, like that's
like truly and honestly, the entrepreneur brain in me is like, oh yeah, I need a mission statement and I need values, and we got mission statements and we got values. We got all that stuff. I got all that. But it's like when people tell me like what the goal is for Dear World, I'm like, what's the goal of any?
Tell more stories.
Like,
I mean,
it's like, for
unlock more stories. That's it.
I think for a time I was like, oh, I need to like be able to answer this, and it is just a pursuit of like our own truths, whatever that may be, through this thing that looks and feels like whatever I guess Dear World is now.
Yeah. No, I mean, a lot of artists like struggle with the whole artist to entrepreneur, like being a business, and like you've been
totally
successful, like, right? Like, and it's and I think that entrepreneurs are very artistic. It's just in a different way. Yeah. There's a very like interesting symbiosis there.
I would say entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur before I'm an artist, and we don't have enough time to get into that, but it is
interesting. That's true. Well, I
would say if I had to rank.
I was gonna end it like sort of like asking like I think it's too hard the way I was gonna end. Where I don't know unless you think it is not, but I was gonna end it where maybe you like would, because part of the Dear World process is that I loved was like you reflect and then you pair up in one-on-ones and you share the story, and then the other person who's listening to your story like picks out, they actually help pick out the words.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's very collaborative.
Yeah, it's very collaborative. So actually, but then let's just end with I do want you to tell the story of the nurse, because you helped her pick these words, right?
Yeah, awesome. This is a nurse named Debbie Ford. She's actually the head nurse of this hospital in New Orleans, Ochsner Hospital. Shout out to Ochsner. Thanks for being our partners. And this story, if you asked her why she wrote, she raised her hand. She'll tell a story about the first COVID patient who left the hospital after the epidemic or the peak in New Orleans, and they, New Orleans, we got to have a party no matter what. So they had a socially distanced party where, she rolled out of the hospital, elderly African-American woman. And they roll her out of the hospital, and all the nurses and doctors are, they're in their spacesuits, but they formed a caravan or a parade line for her to go through. And they had a socially distanced band playing When the Saints Go Marching In. And at the end, Debbie Ford says, I'm about 50 yards away from this woman. And she turns around and she raised her hand. And she's just like, it was the moment. They talked a lot about, Sarah, that they didn't have a lot of wins. They haven't had a lot of wins. So they held on to these wins tightly. And so this was Debbie Ford just talking about one of the wins they had during a very difficult time. So she raised her hand.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, RX, so great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming here with me and holding the space. I wish you all.
I love you.
I love you too.
I appreciate you. You're an incredible human, and keep your head up. All right.
Thank you. Same. Everyone, please go link in with Robert, follow Dear World, go through the process. It is so wonderful. I highly recommend it and him. So that is that. I actually feel a little bit better. So thank you. You're still giving, which is great. And next week I have slated to talk with Joshua Grimes, who is a lawyer, and we're going to talk about the legalities of virtual events. So we're going to equip ourselves with some legal things. And that would be it for today. I hope you all have a really wonderful day. Spread lots of love and joy and stay strong. Bye now.